Merhabalar sayın izleyiciler. Konumuz Baalbek'teki devasa bloklar. Lübnan'ın Bekaa Vadisi'ndeki Baalbek isimli arkeolojik bölgesinde devasa bloklar olması bazı insanlara uzaylıları düşündürüyor. Ben uzaylıların olduğunu ya da olmadığını söylemiyorum. Her iki durum için de elimde bir kanıt yok. Ancak sahte ya da geçersiz uzaylı kanıtlarının her halükarda ayıklanması gerektiğini düşünüyorum. Bu videoda da yapmaya çalışacağımız tam olarak budur. Bu sebeple uzaylılar hakkındaki kanaatiniz her ne olursa olsun objektif, sorgulayan ve rahat bir bakış açısıyla videonun keyfini çıkarın. Antik Uzaylılar belgeselinde Baalbek'teki 3 adet devasa blok uzaylılar için büyük bir kanıt olarak sunuluyor. Hatta Anunnakilerle ilişkilendiriyorlar. Fakat Dr. Michael Heiser'ın da katkılarıyla Chris White'ın hazırlamış olduğu başka bir belgesel daha var. Bu belgeselde Antik Uzaylılar belgeselinin hataları kanıtları ile beraber gözler önüne serilmiştir. Sizleri bu belgeselin Baalbek'le ilgili kısmının altyazılı çevirisiyle baş başa bırakacağım. White ve Heiser'ın belgeselinde öncelikle Antik Uzaylılar belgeselinden bir kesit sunuyorlar ve sonrasında kanıtları ile beraber kendi cevaplarını veriyorlar. Ben de karışıklık olmaması için Antik Uzaylılar belgeselinin sözlerini vişne rengi arka planla, Dr. Heiser ve White'ın belgeselinin sözlerini ise siyah arka planla sundum. Ayrıca bu belgeselde bir çeşit dipnot sistemi kullanılmıştır. Zaman zaman kenarlarda görebileceğiniz sayılar sunulan bilginin kaynağını işaret eden dipnot numaralarıdır. Bu videonun açıklamalar kısmında verilecek olan linkten bu dipnotlara ulaşabilir ve sunulan bilgilerin kaynaklarını araştırabilirsiniz. Son olarak bir şey söyleyeyim. Hem altyazı okumak hem videoyu takip etmek zor olacağı için birçok yerde orijinal seslendirmeyi bozmadan videoyu yavaşlatmaya çalıştım. Yine de yeterli gelmemiş olma olasılığına karşı durdurma ve geri alma özelliklerinin elinizin altında olduğunu hatırlatmada fayda görüyorum. Bu belgesel kesitini sonuna kadar kendim de seslendirebilirdim ama orijinal seslendirmeyi duymanın daha güven verici olacağını umduğum için altyazılı sunumu daha doğru buluyorum. İyi seyirler diliyorum sayın izleyiciler.
Eastern Lebanon, the Bekaa Valley. Here, at this archaeological site, stand the ruins of Heliopolis, built in the 4th century BC by Alexander the Great to honor Zeus. But beneath the Corinthian columns and remnants of both Greek and Roman architecture lie the ruins of a site that is much, much older. According to archaeologists, it dates back nearly 9,000 years. The ancient city of Baalbek, named after the early Canaanite deity Baal.
And so because it was already sacred to the god Baal, then later the Greeks and the Romans then would build temples on this very same spot.
Archaeological surveys have revealed that the enormous stone foundation that lies at the base of the site dates back tens of thousands of years. But even more significant to ancient astronaut theorists is their belief that the colossal stone platform may once have served as a landing pad for space travelers.
The idea that ancient aliens will try to convey is that underneath the Roman ruins lies a very old platform that was once used to launch spacecraft. As we watch the next clip, listen for the first thing they cite as evidence for this claim.
But what was originally there before the Roman temple was this spaceport platform that was apparently used for extraterrestrials coming and going on planet Earth.
As evidence, researchers point to the gigantic megalithic stones incorporated into the foundation, each weighing between 800 to 1,200 tons, and perfectly fitted together.
These three stones they're referring to are called the trilithons, and the heaviest of the three is 800 tons, not 1,200 tons as they say. There are two other stones that are heavier than this around the area, but they are unused. still connected to the bedrock in the quarries, and thus are obviously not part of the trilithons. The way the information is presented about these three stones leads the viewer to believe that they are part of the foundation or platform of the Baalbek site. What they want the viewer to think is that spacecraft lifted off and landed on the stones of this platform. They also claim that these three stones cannot be of Roman construction, as the mainstream archaeologists believe, but they say that they were part of the earliest structure at the Baalbek site, and that the Greeks and Romans only built on top of this ancient foundation. And it is true that there was a very old pre-Roman temple at this site, but we will learn more about that later. Our focus at the moment is the trilithon stones. Ancient Alien says that these three stones are the real mystery of Baalbek.
This is the real mystery of Baalbek, how these stones came to be there, why they were placed there, and specifically how they were transported into place, because some of the stones are of such magnitude that modern machinery is incapable of putting them there, but somehow our ancestors were able to do this.
To solve this mystery, we need to first understand that these three stones do not form the foundation of Baalbek, as is so often suggested. The trilithon stones lay end to end, or long ways, and are part of the narrow wall on the western end of the complex. They are most certainly not the foundation, nor do they constitute a platform, and it would be very awkward for a spaceship to land on top of them, considering the space on top is so narrow. Ancient Aliens tries to make it seem like no one knows the purpose for these stones, or why they had to be so heavy.
But if the moving, hoisting, and setting of such massive stones was so incredibly difficult, then who, or what, placed them there? And perhaps more importantly, why?
The truth is that the purpose for this wall is very well known by archaeologists. It was a retaining wall. Retaining wall technology really improved with the Greeks because of the importance of the amphitheater in their culture. Because most amphitheaters were sunken into the ground and surrounded by earth, they needed to construct retaining walls to hold back the soil. Then the Romans came along and basically perfected the practice. The rule of thumb in retaining walls, even today, is the bigger and heavier the stones, the better the retaining wall. Also, the stones needed to be in as big of sections as possible. In other words, huge sections of uncut stone. It's no coincidence that some of the biggest single stones in the ancient world, besides Baalbek, are also used in retaining walls, and by the Romans as well, as we will see. Retaining walls were especially important if there was a lot of soil erosion at the site, or if the platform you were trying to build was on a steep incline. At Baalbek, the platform was built right on the side of a huge hill, so for that reason alone, it would require a retaining wall if they intended to make a large level platform. But if you added to that a soil erosion problem, you would have two very good reasons for a huge retaining wall at Baalbek. So, does the area around Baalbek have a problem with soil erosion? The answer is yes, probably one of the biggest in the world. You can see evidence of soil erosion all around the Baalbek site. The soil from the top of the hill has been sliding down the hill into the valley below for hundreds of years. One of the leading causes of soil erosion is deforestation. If an area that once had trees has been completely cleared of those trees, the rain no longer will have anything to slow down its velocity. Normally, the rain hits tree branches and the thick foliage that accumulates on the forest floor over time. Also, the soil is kept in check by the root systems of the trees, which hold the soil in place. Lebanon has a picture of a cedar tree on its flag. Their trees have been a symbol of pride for literally millennia, the so-called cedars of Lebanon. But the forests have disappeared long ago, as they were one of the only sites for timber in the ancient Near East, and it was massively deforested in ancient times. In fact, the soil shifting is just as bad today in the Bekaa Valley. The UN in 2006 proposed a series of solutions to deal with this now full-scale environmental disaster in the Baalbek region. Homes in the region are being abandoned as their foundations shift and they become inhabitable. But although these proposed solutions by the UN may be new, this problem is an ancient one the Romans would have been well aware of. The massive trilithon stones provided the weight needed to press down and secure the stones in the wall below. This is why you only see these huge stones on one side of Baalbek, the side where the steep slope is. The idea that these stones were part of a platform and were used as a landing pad is something that requires ignorance of the layout of the site in order to believe. Well, what about the age of this wall? Is it from the Roman period of construction, or is it from the pre-Roman Canaanite era? There is a lot of confusion about this point because there was indeed a very old pre-Roman temple on this site. The pre-Roman Canaanite temple was a pretty standard platform and altar, much like other sites built by the Canaanites, which were referred to in the Old Testament as high places. The original site was probably chosen by the Canaanites because it was indeed on a hill, as any good high place should be, but also because it was less than half a mile from the perfect stone quarry. The early versions of this temple, however, did not have a retaining wall. As the different groups added to the site over the years, the site changed drastically. The Romans alone spent 200 years doing construction at the site. Think of that. That would be like starting a construction project in 1812 that only just now came to completion. That's a long time to be working on a project. So yes, Baalbek is built on a very old Canaanite altar to Baal, but the trilithon stones were not part of that site, nor are they part of the foundation as is often claimed. They are part of a very necessary retaining wall. The question still remains, however, about the methods for moving and lifting these stones.
Some have suggested that this stone alone weighs in excess of 1,200 tons. How was it moved there? Because obviously it's situated on top of these stone rows that we can find down here, which means that this stone had to be lifted and then set on top of these stones down here.
So did the Romans have the technology to move and lift such stones? Well, all you have to do is look one country over to find out. About the same time the Romans were beginning their 200-year project at Baalbek, another project of similar magnitude was beginning by the Roman client king Herod the Great in 19 BC. Herod, using Roman techniques, renovated the Temple Mount to earn favor with the Jews, who viewed him as a Roman proxy, not a Jew. The expanded version of the temple was double the size of the original, but in order to make this expansion, he had to incorporate part of the hill to the northeast, which meant that he had to construct a massive retaining wall in order to hold back the force of the earth in order to build the massive platform. There is a portion of this retaining wall still standing today, and it contains the second largest set of single stones next to Baalbek. Just like Baalbek, there are several of these stones lined up to form the wall and to provide the weight and size needed to hold back the earth. They call the four largest stones the master course. The weight of the heaviest one is 630 tons, only a little over 100 tons less than Baalbek's biggest stone. And no one denies that these stones were cut, moved, and lifted to perfection using Roman and local techniques. As a side note, it's tempting to think that the holes visible in these stones were used for lifting, but these holes were cut after the stones were placed. They were used to hold plaster in place for certain water projects and only go a few inches deep. Anyway, is it really logical to believe that the Romans could cut, move, and lift 630-ton blocks for retaining walls just fine, but if you added another 100 tons, it would require alien technology? We know that the Romans, about this same time, had taken a liking to Egyptian obelisks. They started dragging these obelisks back to Rome in large numbers, and Rome was hundreds of miles by land and sea from Egypt, whereas Baalbek was less than a mile from the quarry. Some of these obelisks were almost 500 tons, so the Romans had a lot of opportunities to get good at moving stones about the same size and shape of the trilithon stones. There are even Roman descriptions of the process of moving obelisks by Marcellinus Comus, as well as reliefs such as the one on the bottom of the Theodosius obelisk in Istanbul. The ancient Roman writings of Marcus Vitruvius Pollio describe in detail many of the Roman technological advantages, like pulleys, which would reduce the force needed by half for each pulley used. He even described their ingenious way of moving stones by constructing huge oak wheels on either end of the block, whether they were round like pillars or huge rectangular stones like the trilithons. They would then be pulled by oxen to the site. So what about the lifting of the trilithon stones at Baalbek? Some make the point that the trilithon stones do not have Lewis holes in them like many of the other Roman stones at Baalbek. Lewis holes is the name for the holes that the Romans would drill in the stones for lifting with their cranes. Yes, the Romans had cranes, and although their cranes only had a 5-ton capacity, often they would combine many of them together, which would obviously give them a greater capacity. So why don't these 3 stones contain these holes, like all the rest of the stones at Baalbek? Well, first of all, I wouldn't be so sure that they don't. No one has ever seen what is on the ends of these stones. It may very well be that they decided against a straight-up or dead lift of the trilithon stones because of their weight, and instead decided to lift up only one side of the stone. You would really only need to lift it high enough and long enough to get even the smallest brace underneath it, because at that point you would have a number of mechanical advantages and therefore options. For example, watch as this man makes a Stonehenge in his backyard all by himself using a simple counterweight method.
I've tried to do this without any mechanical machinery at all. I've used mostly sticks and stones for my equipment. No pulleys, no hoist, no metal levers. Just try to use gravity too, I believe is my favorite tool. Whoop.
The first goal is getting this block 3 feet off the ground.
In order to move it up to this point, I just rock the block back and forth, adding weight to that end, and that opens a gap on this side, and just slide a board in. Then I add the weight to that end, there it goes, and slide a board in on this end.
This shoring box acts like a jack, slowly raising the block.
But it's not really even necessary for them to have been lifted. A French paper written by Jean-Pierre Adam meticulously details how the stones could have been moved using the specifications provided by Marcus Vitruvius Pollio. By constructing roads underneath the stones on rollers, and the roads were raised to lead to the exact place of their placement, which was easy at Baalbek because of the terrain. So it wouldn't require any lifting, and then using man-powered drums and a system of capstans to pull the stones along the road. This method would have only required 144 workers to accomplish. It's also helpful for people to remember that the largest stone ever moved in the world is the so-called Thunderstone in Russia. Moved in the 1700s using no modern equipment, this stone is 1.5 tons larger than the largest trilithon stone. And we know that moving it didn't require any alien technology. Well, what about this claim?
What's really interesting about Baalbek is it's always been known as the landing place. There's an actual text from Sumerian times called the Epic of Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh actually claims to have seen rockets descend and ascend from Baalbek, the landing place.
These claims come directly from the writings of Zechariah Sitchin, and they are totally untrue. Baalbek was not called the landing place, and the Epic of Gilgamesh never speaks of rockets ascending and descending anywhere in it.
If you're going to make these assertions, Okay, I would want the passage. I want to see the passage in Gilgamesh that names Baalbek specifically. Okay, I'm naturally skeptical that there is such a passage, but if you're going to make this claim, you have to be able to establish with certainty, not even just a general region, you have to establish with certainty that these are the stones, or that these stones are what is being referred to in any given text.
Sitchin, when making this claim in his book, never tells the reader where they can find this in the Epic of Gilgamesh. This is probably because it makes it harder for the reader to check his facts.
Yeah, I have personally found the writings of Sitchin very frustrating from the perspective of a scholar and an academic, which is what I am. It's sort of reflexively what I look for. It's very hard to follow his trail because he just doesn't cite sources. Even if he cites a source, for instance, an ancient text, he doesn't give you sort of the chapter and verse. He doesn't give you the tablet numbers, the line numbers, and I have to look at it and say it's either really lazy or he doesn't want you to be able to check up on him. It's one or the other.
I will link the actual section of the epic as well as a link to the online resources to check the Sumerian text for yourselves at the website ancientaliensdebunked.com. Nowadays, all the Sumerian tablets, including their own dictionaries, are searchable online. Yes, the Sumerians wrote their own extensive and detailed dictionaries, so we don't have to trust Sitchin or anyone else. We can basically just ask the Sumerians what they thought a word meant. And it becomes painfully obvious to anyone that cares enough to look that Sitchin was at best totally incompetent as a translator, and at worst a scam artist. See SitchinIsWrong.com to begin your journey in losing any confidence in the so-called translations of Zecharia Sitchin. In conclusion, the Trilithon stones are part of a necessary retaining wall, not a foundation, and such walls were common to the Greeks and Romans. The retaining wall was not part of the simple, original, much smaller temple at Baalbek, and we know from other retaining walls of similar size, built by the Romans at the same time and in the same area, that they were more than capable of moving and placing stones of that size and shape, also evidenced by their ability to move obelisks. This is especially true if you gave them over 200 years in which to do it.